Hey everybody, welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. It's Bill Whittle, and you are watching the full work lights edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, never before seen by human eyes. And generally speaking, we in show business have an expression which is never go full work lights, but that's what we're doing. We got the work lights on, and the reason we have the work lights on is because I cannot get this bloody eyesight camera to work. No matter what I do, I downloaded an app to control the aperture. It just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. And besides, I got something cool to show you anyway. So we have a dealer's choice edition for episode 77 of the Stratosphere Lounge. And yes, I know the place is a mess, but it's not going to be a mess a whole lot longer. We've got the gigantic Stratosphere banner is being printed. I think Monday or Tuesday. We'll get that in. And then we have all kinds of groovy things that are going up on the wall. I just ordered another 8 Sid Mead prints like the ones I had on the back. They come on acrylic and they're mounted with aluminum post, and we offset it off the wall, and So anyway, every now and then you got to get the work lights on. So I just wanted to show you something that just arrived earlier today. One of the things I told you about in the future will be when we get over there. I know we're still building here, guys. I mean, we've been working here for a while, but we're getting there. That's going to be the Stratosphere Lounge wall with the Stratosphere Lounge banner. And I thought, man, I'm going to need some chairs. I'm going to need a cool chair for me to sit in. And then if we do a guest, which would be nice, then I'm going to need a chair for the guest. So I'll need 2 chairs. So I was looking online for chairs, and I wanted something that evokes something. We got this whole kind of retro future thing going here, right? We got the whole Stratosphere Lounge, Sid Mead kind of groovy space age bachelor studio pad kind of thing happening. And I needed a chair. I needed 2 chairs, not the couch. And I wanted a chair that evoked something. And I found them. So I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to show you the chair. And we'll see in the comment section, which if you watch a show on YouTube, you never get to play with, but it's really fun. If you see what the chair reminds you of, you can type it into the comment section, and the winner gets a shout out on the world famous Stratosphere Lounge. Ready? All right, I'm going to get out of the way, and I've got 2 of these, and just tell me if the chair reminds you of anything. Okay, there we go. So now we have to wait for the delay for the signal to go out and come back in, because I think that chair is really, really... It's the Kirk chair. Very good. Winston Smith Room 101 gets it right away. It says no Kirk chair, but the word Kirk is the word I was looking for. That's the secret. We'll say the secret word and win $100. That's exactly right. It's got this kind of groovy space age kind of, Kirk kind of chair. It's an incredibly good looking chair. It's an excruciatingly uncomfortable chair, but we don't worry about those things because I would rather look good than feel good, darling. Yeah, I've got 2 of those, and we'll set them up against that wall over there, and we can do kind of a groovy sort of dick cavity kind of, but without the, smarminess kind of, happening thing. So, here come all the Kirk remarks, but boy, I'll tell you what, I love that chair. I just love it. I think that chair is so bloody cool, and I got 2 of them. So, everybody's getting it, man. It's like, here comes 200 Kirk's chairs. It's just boom. It's the floodgates. I know I've said this before. I'll say it again. When we did the Star Trek Afterburner, I won't go into a whole lot of detail because I say it almost every episode. But we made a green chair from plywood to the specifications from Paramount for Captain Kirk's chair, and I have to tell you, that is the most excruciatingly uncomfortable thing to sit in the world, the actual throne, the Enterprise throne. It is so wide and so shallow, it's unbearable. But, like I said, rather look good than feel good. And speaking of looking good, those Kirk replica chairs, they made them a couple years ago. It was, I think it was like $5,000. I'll get one day. If you really want to know, when the Stratosphere Lounge is complete, the Stratosphere Lounge, you will know the Stratosphere Lounge is complete when in the Stratosphere Lounge here in this office, and this will happen because we got a 3-year lease on this office, so either this will happen or I'll be outside selling pencils. What what you'll know when the room is finished, because in one corner will be a life-size working model of the B9 robot from Lost in Space. There'll be a Captain Kirk chair with the lights that light up, and I may even get a Robbie the Robot. I'm not a huge Robbie the Robot fan, but there's a life-size Robbie the Robot that is just spectacular. So when you see those things happening, you know you're in business. So anyway, that's probably enough conversation about chairs. Got to be out of here at about 7:30 tonight, so we got about a relatively short show. Got some interesting questions, fun questions. It looks like they're going to move Firewalls to Friday, which gives me just so much more time. I mean, these things are almost 2 full days of just post-production on these things. And this last one about the Kremlin, just I'm going to do a show on I think I'm going to do a show just on what I learned on the gulags and on everything else, because I mean, I don't want to say I had nightmares about it, but I would wake up thinking about all of that. The amount of murder in that country, and how far back it goes and how deep it goes, and the complicity in the murder, and the amount of, and just it's just mind-boggling. And the stuff I just had to filter out because they're just out of time. There's only so many murders you can talk about in 7 and 8 minutes. But my God, what a horror! Really incredible. So this is Welcome to Your Socialism. I think we have a question something like that later on tonight. So here we go with episode 77. My gosh, somebody said the Picard chair. I'm going to paraphrase it. We don't have a Picard chair. It ran away. Okay, so anyway, here we go. We got some fun questions from all around the board, dealer's choice for tonight. So the first question comes from our friend Dave Olson. My friend anyway, Dave's been a stalwart, and he's always got great things to say, and he's charming and lovely fellow. Dave Olson says, your thoughts on people who drive in the left lane slower than the flow of the other traffic. That was down near the bottom of the questions, but I moved it to the top. I think if I was the president of the United States, I would allocate a fair amount of money from our Department of Transportation funds. And what I would do is I would use the money, and I would hire 4.5 million Germans to come to America to teach us how to drive. That's what I would do. I would hire 4 or 5 million Germans and give them upscale accommodations in the extended stay Marriott of their choice, and I'd just have them on the road, and I'd just teach them. I'd pay them real money to teach us how to drive. By now that when it comes to America, I'm a big fan of this country, and there's much about Europe I don't like. But I'll say this about the Germans: my God, those people know how to drive, and they don't tolerate bad driving. I think, honestly, yeah. Bill Rant Alert says Brent Cates, and he's right. If I was a dictator, this is the only thing I would actually impose the death penalty for: would be murder, rape, and consistently being passed on the right. I don't know why this is so hard to figure out, and I live in Los Angeles, where the traffic is horrific, and even in the congested parts, look, there comes a point when the congestion is so great that lane discrimination doesn't help you. But most of the time, when you are going down the freeway, these blockages are due to some idiot in the left lane just tooling along. It's like, you got your lane, I got my lane. If I get passed by the right on the right, I almost get ill. It's like, that's my own fault. I should not have been passed on the right. I should have moved over. And what we do when we drive, when you drive the way you fly, which is competently, presumably, you are in the farthest most right lane, and then you only go one lane to the left to get past who you need to get past, and then you get back over to the right again. Which, by the way, I'm fully convinced of this, has the unintended but extremely beneficial side effect of getting you far fewer speeding tickets. Far fewer. I think I remember when I was a kid, when I was getting tickets like every day, I read that it's something like 94% of all the speeding tickets written in this country are written in the far left lane. It's like 94%. So I'm always in the far right lane, and if I have to pass somebody, I get to the left and I get back over to the right. And honestly, on a drive from Los Angeles to San Diego, this is the one thing that consistently makes me crazy. Just genuinely makes me crazy, because this is the one thing that is so easy to fix and is so. I think the thing about it is it's the cluelessness of it. I guess it's kind of an interesting thing to lead into. I actually have had people working for me. God knows I've worked for other people for most of my life. But when I have people working for me, I am extraordinarily tolerant of mistakes. I really am not trying to brag here. I'm just telling you the truth. If people make a mistake, I say, Bill, I screwed up. I'm sorry. I'm with them forever. I make 100 mistakes a day. But the things that I don't tolerate are that I do not suffer fools gladly in the degree of incompetence. If somebody makes a mistake, I want them to admit they made a mistake, and I want them to say, okay, so I'll try not to do this again. It's the cluelessness of it. It's the cluelessness of a guy who's in the right lane, and let's say it's a 60-mile-an-hour zone, or 65, and there's somebody in the left lane doing 65, and they're both doing 65 together, and they're side by side for 20 miles, and the guy in the right lane is not doing anything wrong, but the guy in the left lane is. He's got a line of people behind him, and he just either doesn't notice or doesn't care. And in either one of those cases, that's where vehicle-mounted rocket-propelled grenades begin to have a use, I think. There was a Steve Jackson game, a role-playing game called Car Wars, which I never played because I just never really got into it. But the whole idea was you got a chance to spend your money on armoring up and ammoing up your car, and it was just kind of a Mad Max sort of world where you just kind of drove around and the car was the weapon. Had that fantasy a few times driving through these streets. And it's not just in LA, it's not just in California, you see it everywhere across the country. People just tooling along in the left lane with a line of people 4 miles behind them, and they just da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I don't know what to make of it. If they know what they're doing, then they're being dicks. If they don't know what they're doing, then they probably shouldn't be on the road. Because it's a situational awareness thing. If you're not aware of the fact that there are cars right behind you and cars back to the horizon, you probably shouldn't be on the road. When I get through traffic, when I'm moving through traffic, I'm about 6 or 7 seconds ahead of the car. It's the same thing in aviation, and what that really means is, when I'm really trying to make time on the freeway, we have 5-6 lanes each way here on the 405, and it's constantly in motion. And it's going to turn into the car driver episode. Well, why not? We never covered this before. If I'm moving, first of all, for my safety, for my personal safety, I like to be moving faster than the traffic, and the reason is, if I'm moving faster than the traffic, then all the changes are in front of me, not behind me. I can be aware of them. I don't want people coming up, zipping past me. When I make a lane change and I'm moving faster than the traffic, I'm moving into a position. I'm not moving over, waiting to get rear-ended by somebody else. Whenever I make a lane change, I do a head check. I was taught that in high school, in driver's ed. I check the mirrors, and then I do a head check. Can't tell you how many times that saved me because of the blind spot. And the Camaro has a real bad blind spot, to be honest with you. But I'm aware of what's going on in the mirror, and mostly I'm 4, 5, 6 seconds ahead of the car, which means that I'm looking at where I expect that car to be in 5 or 6 seconds, and all the time I am constantly doing what I do when I fly my airplane. Where am I going to go if things go south? I was flying back from French Valley last night. It was about an hour, Temecula, back to Van Nuys, and without... I didn't want to be dealing with air traffic control. And so you've got a lot of airspace you have to worry about. You have to kind of fly underneath the Class Bravo. I'm getting to a point here, believe it or not. Had to fly underneath the incoming jets for LAX. And it was great. I was just so aware. You're like, okay, I've got in 4 miles, I got to be under 2,500 feet. Where's the nearest traffic? Are there any airplanes around me? You're aware. You're switched on. You're looking around. You've got some situational awareness going. You're ahead of the airplane. And certainly in traffic, it's the same thing. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Last night, on the way down and on the way back, especially at nighttime. It's like, where am I going to go if it gets quiet in here? I don't want to be thinking about it once it gets quiet. I want to constantly be aware of what I'm going to do if the engine fails on the airplane. I do it all the time. It's how I fly. I've never known how not to fly that way. I'm a glider pilot. Gliders, you don't get to go where you want to go. Gliders are always thinking about, well, I'm going to run out of lift maybe, or where am I going to go? So it's a great, great, great thing to do. So on the freeway, I actually am trying to keep myself 4, 5, 6 seconds ahead of the car, watching what the traffic is doing, and always trying to remember, or at least keep in mind, if this guy cuts me off, I got a left lane here, or I've got a shoulder here, or I can go here, I can decelerate, whatever. You can learn how to do that, and it may sound a little more complicated than it needs to be, but when I'm trying to move through traffic, that's what I do. If I'm having a conversation, I'll just get in the number 1 lane or the number 2 lane because everybody's merging in the number 1 lane, and I'll just sit and talk, and I'm not worried about it. But if I'm moving, that's what I do. So yes, I would hire 4 million Germans, 5 million Germans, pay them top dollar, come over here, teach us how to drive. It's a disgrace. I really think it's a disgrace. And I've heard, I've never been to Germany, but I've heard on the Autobahn, if somebody's coming up on you and you're in the left lane, they will blow their horns and flash the lights and get right on your bumper, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them. And the final thing I'll say about this is, given the traffic situations and given the amount of trouble it causes, it's so simple and it's safer. You know, it's safer. It's just safer. If you were just aware of it, just do it. One of the nice things too, I did a lot of driving for a while on the interstates, and one of the nice things that's just a nice feeling for me is I love it when, if you are making a lane change in front of a truck and you give them a signal and you give them enough time and you do a lane change in front of a truck that gets the truck to give you a little flash of the lights. It's like it's an upward cycle. It's like, you're courteous and professional. I'm courteous and professional. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Whenever I get a trucker, whenever I make a move or a lane change in front of a truck, or I give him enough room, or whatever the case may be, and I always get that little flash of the lights, it's like his way of saying, hey, thanks, man, for not, for having enough of the game together to not scare me out of my wits, because they're on the road all the time, those professionals, and it's important to me to be as professional as I can be. And the stakes are high here. You're moving at 70 miles an hour. You can hurt yourself at that speed. So I take driving and flying very seriously. Some things I don't take so seriously, but those 2 things I do. And moving on. Vince Yoder says, we know you have no desire to be the real president. I do have a desire to be the real president. I just don't think it's feasible. In fact, what you have to do to be president disqualifies any normal, sane person. But would you at least be interested in being White House press secretary? No. Or some other advisor for the next conservative president? Yes, I would. I would like to be. I'd like to write speeches for the president. I'd like to write speeches for Ted Cruz. I'd like to help with the messaging and help with getting these things down, because they're very simple. All these arguments are extremely simple, and they're so simple that most people don't know how to make them. So, yeah, I would love that. I'd love that. That would be great honor and a great pleasure, and be something I'd be good at. I wouldn't be good at, the details of that job and all that stuff. It's just, I don't know. As I've said 100 times, the only reason I really would like to be president is to be commander-in-chief. I'd be an awesome commander-in-chief. But I really have no desire to be a politician of any kind. And I certainly don't have a desire to be the press secretary. That's a horrible job. With that said, I think I would like to be able to help with the message and with the speech writing. So that would be cool. Did anybody else hear that loud ding, or did that come through my headsets? Doesn't matter, I guess, because it's already happened. So that's your question answered there for you, Vince. I could go on for another 20 minutes, but I have nothing else to say about it. Joshua Tiemans, one of the Tiemans brothers. Welcome to the Tiemans Hour, and this is Joshua's time. So his question is, if the Constitution had been written in the everyday speak of today, i.e. if we could perfectly, unambiguously understand it, how much better off would we be as a nation? Well, Josh, not to argue with it, but it is written in everyday speak, and it is perfectly, unambiguously understood. If it was written in the modern vernacular, we wouldn't be any better because the problem is not understanding the Constitution. The problem is disregarding the Constitution, even though it's clear as it can be. And the Commerce Clause is the perfect example. The Commerce Clause is the perfect example. Congress wants the power to do what they want to do, and they want to get their little fingers in everything and regulate commerce between the states. And they say, oh, it's a Commerce Clause. No, the Commerce Clause says that the Congress shall have the power to regulate, which means to make regular. It doesn't mean to restrict or control. It just means to make even, to make fair, level commerce between the states, the Indian tribes, and foreign powers. We've had this conversation many times. I'm not going to have it again, other than to say, if they wanted it to say between the people, they would have said the people. But it doesn't. It says the states, Indian tribes, or foreign powers. So the Commerce Clause is not justifiable to do anything. And if Congress can do anything because of the Commerce Clause, then there is no Constitution, no reason for it. Just say Congress have the power to do whatever it damn well wants to. There you go. So there is nothing about the Constitution that's difficult to understand. One of the people I point to whenever this subject comes up, because he needs it, retroactively and posthumously, is Gouverneur Morris. Everybody talks about Thomas Paine and Franklin and Madison and Jefferson and all the guys, Adams. And nobody talks about Gouverneur Morris. Gouverneur Morris was in charge of the Committee on Style, and he was the guy who basically took these arcane, technical, operating manual things and put them into language that a farmer pushing a plow could understand. That is an extraordinarily difficult and important thing to do. It's easy to teach things that you know, but if you can teach things that you know simply, if you can simplify things, that's real knowledge. Simplifying something is just the process of knowing what to leave out. You know, there's a classic line that's been attributed to a bunch of people, Mark Twain among them, but it's really true. Sorry about the long letter. If I had more time, I would have written less. It's absolutely true. It's harder to say less than it is to say more, which is why the show rambles on as it does, because I don't have to be concise. Gouverneur Morris was a guy who basically took all of these things and put them into language everybody could understand. And because he had a little room left over, and because he was so good at it, he wrote a sentence that most people know: "We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice." That's Gouverneur Morris. It's not Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson didn't write that sentence. Gouverneur Morris did. And the fact that nobody knows his name is an absolute shame. It's not just a shame, it's a crime. I'm speaking as a writer here. That's the greatest sentence ever written. You'd think that the greatest sentence ever written would have an attribution to it, but it doesn't. So I disagree with you. I don't think the Constitution needs to be rewritten in plain language, and if it was, we'd be fine, because it is written in plain language, and people still dick around with it. You know, they start making, for example, the Second Amendment, you know. And everybody says, well, the right to keep and bear arms only applies to a well-regulated militia. It doesn't, actually, if you read the sentence the way the sentence is constructed. A well-regulated militia being necessary, blah, 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 the right of the people shall not be infringed. That's the sentence. The right of the people shall not be infringed. That's like saying the right to free speech shall not be infringed. And if I said something to the effect of, the ability to wear a clown hat at a party being an important part of American life, the right of people to free expression shall not be infringed. The fact that the clown hat is there doesn't mean anything regarding the actual statement of the operational fact, which is it shall not be infringed, period. But people say, oh, it just applies to a militia. No, it doesn't just apply to a militia. If you can read a sentence, you can tell it doesn't just apply to a militia. It's easy to break the sentence into two halves, and if you do, you can see it's irrelevant. They threw it in there for ornamentation. I wish they hadn't. By the way, if you ever run into that argument, the militia argument, you might want to point out to people, this was pointed out to me, and I think it was pointed out to me on a Stratosphere Lounge show, that the definition of a militia is a group of people who bring their own weapons. If you have a militia, it's a calling up of people with their own weapons. So this is why the argument was so self-evident that they put the militia in there. It says, well, if we ever need to get together a group of people with their own weapons, it's important that the people stay armed. That's basically what the Second Amendment says. So you can't just say, oh, well, that only gives you the right to arm a militia. you don't know what a militia is if you say that. And if you give somebody arms, then they're an army. If somebody brings their own arms, they're a militia. So this whole argument is just absurd on its face. And this is the point I'm trying to make here, Josh. It's not like people can't figure it out. It's they know what it says and they know what it means. They just keep doing it. And they assume that we're not going to pay attention. And they're right. So they get away with it because we let them get away with it. They don't get away with it because it's unclear. It's crystal clear. And as I've said before, for those people that say, the Supreme Court ruled that the Commerce Clause gives them the right to do this, well, it's simple. The Supreme Court was wrong. They were wrong. There are 9 great legal. I don't care how many great legal minds there are. I can read an English sentence, and they are wrong. And my vote as a citizen, being able to read an English sentence, trumps their vote as a person with 30 years of law experience. And if it doesn't, then the Constitution has no meaning at all. If you're saying that you have to have a law degree to understand the laws of this country, then either I have the wrong idea about what this country is or they do. And it's them. They're the ones who have the wrong idea because I can read. Moving on. Patrick Dillon asks, why not nuclear-powered commercial ships and planes? Why not? When people talk about nuclear power and how dangerous it is, we can't let people get too close to a nuclear power plant because of radiation levels. I might point out to them that, I don't know how many actual nuclear subs have been commissioned in this Navy of ours, but certainly, without question, tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, of people have sailed around the world for years, sleeping in a steel tube inside of which is a nuclear reactor. It's not like they're 40 miles away or 3 miles away or on the other side of 40 feet of concrete. They are sleeping next to nuclear reactors. And the U.S. Navy has been extraordinarily good at this. Just extraordinarily good at it. Now, nuclear-powered airplanes are a little tricky because they leave many designs leave a radioactive wake. But that's not the way I would do a nuclear-powered airplane. Nuclear-powered ship is easy. We've got them in nuclear-powered carriers, and we used to have nuclear-powered cruisers, certainly submarines, and there've been nuclear-powered icebreakers. So a ship is a big nothing. It's easy to do. But a nuclear-powered airplane is interesting, and the way I would do a nuclear-powered airplane is I would have a nuclear source, just a power plant, and I'd use it to drive electric motors. I'd have electric fans on those engines. And if you had a nuclear power plant, and electric turbofan, just an electric motor spinning the fan instead of a jet engine, then you would simply have if it's possible to imagine a more reliable thing than a jet engine, then probably the electric motor will get you there. But you would be able to fly the thing forever, and just forever. And one thing I'm going to use in one of my later sci-fi movies is I'm going to have a nuclear-powered jetpack. And it's not going to be a jetpack in terms of the Great Lost in Space jetpack, which is an actual jetpack, uses rocket exhaust. Because those guys only had a minute and a half of flight time, something like that. But seriously, if you had a little tiny nuclear source, this little radiothermal generator, something generated some heat, you could put that on a backpack. You could use that to generate electrical power. Just heats up some conducting fluid. The fluid goes through a turbine. And so you've just got a little hot little thing of something, and it's making electricity all the time. And then you hook that up to 2 ducted fans, and then you've got a nuclear-powered jetpack that never, ever runs out of fuel, ever, ever, ever. You sleep in it, just set the autopilot, off you go. And the reliability of something like that would be so high that I'd actually be willing to fly in that, because electric motors are virtually foolproof. They almost never just fail without warning. If you had a little nuclear power pack, you not only have nuclear airplanes, you could have nuclear jetpack. And in my world, we would have all of these things. And I suppose there's a danger from terrorism, but in my world, we wouldn't have terrorism, because in my world, we wouldn't tolerate it. But it's not my world. I just live in this one. Ted Ted asks, any thought on Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last? No, because I haven't read it, but I did take the question because I think it's interesting. I suspect I know what it's basically about. This is the difference between leadership and dictatorship. And you can take this from nations, or you can take it all the way down to an office, an insurance office. You can force people to do things using your authority. You can coerce them to doing things, or you can make them want to do something. And any idiot with power can use his authority to coerce people to do things, but it takes an actual leader to make somebody want to follow you. And the way you get people to want to follow you, first of all, you have to be competent. Nobody's going to follow somebody who just doesn't know what they're doing. It's combat or business. No one's going to follow somebody who plainly doesn't know what they're doing. But if you know what you're doing, the way you get people to follow you is you lead by example. And one of the ways you lead by example, I'm assuming this is what he's writing about, is that you eat last. You make sure that your people are fed first. If you feed your people first and you eat after them, what does that say? What is it saying to the people who are in fact under you, under your authority? What's it saying to them? Every day it says to them that you value them. It says to them that you're not just an ego. It says to them that you're not using your authority as a bludgeon for your own inadequacies and your own insecurities. It's saying that leadership is a privilege, and it's a privilege that has to be re-earned on a regular basis, and that you have the confidence to eat last. A good leader does something that's very simple to do, really, and just all you need is some fundamental self-assurance and fundamental self-confidence. A leader always passes the credit down, but always takes the blame on himself. And bad managers do precisely the opposite. Just that simple. Credit goes down, blame stops here. And that is a sign of somebody with great security, and the sign of somebody that people will in fact follow. And the work you will get out of people who willingly follow you compared to the work you get out of people through coercion is just night and day. So it's just night and day. And that's what I assume this book is about. If it's not, then I'll write that book. It's a really fundamental thing to do. And I can't tell you how easy it is. And at the same time, I can't tell you how rare it is. I was working on a movie. I was directing a little crappy little industrial film. It's about 1985, I guess. I was in Fort Lauderdale, and we were doing a little industrial film for an interior designer, and she wanted to show off some houses, some interiors. And rather than just having a slideshow, we sold her on the idea of doing a little movie, a little 6-7 minute movie where there's the home couple, the host couple, and the guest couple, and they walk in and they show them the house and they serve them food, and it's a nice way to do it. It's a little more elegant and cool, so great. So we did this, and we were working on the thing. I was probably, 30, I wasn't even that old. I was 27, 28, somewhere in that ballpark. And I was directing this thing, and we had a dolly track down, and I had these actors that had to make a cross from the living room into the kitchen. And I was trying to figure out how to work this and get the angles right, and I just couldn't do it. I don't know, I just couldn't get it. Usually it's a piece of cake, but there's something about the geometry of the room or something. And in the middle of this thing, after thinking this over for a minute or two, I just said, I don't know how to make this cross work. If anybody has an idea of how to do this, I'd love to hear it, because I got to get them from there to here, and I don't know how to cover this shot. Now, this is an important distinction. If it was clear to the crew that I didn't know how to cover any shot and all I was doing was lost, then I would have had nothing but contempt and deserved nothing but contempt. But I was pretty confident, knew exactly what I was doing all day. Finally, I come to a place where I don't know what I'm doing. I got a problem here. And I didn't think about it. I just asked. Well, after that shoot was over, we were wrapping up, and we paid the actors, and all four of them came up to me and said, "Hey, can we talk to you for a second?" I thought, well, here we go. Turns out that they had all worked on, by coincidence, a major Coca-Cola commercial that had been shot like 3 days ago with the guy who was making $300,000 or $400,000 per commercial. It was like the top commercial director at the time. And apparently this guy was just, how dare you question me, you sons of bitches, just really, just yelling and screaming, I'm the director here, just raving mad lunatic. And these four actors apparently were so impressed by this, they made a point of coming up to me after the shoot and saying, I just want to tell you, we just worked on this big movie with this guy who's a complete jerk, and we've never seen anybody, never worked with a director who was confident enough to say, if anybody has a better idea of how to do this, I'd love to hear it. And that really, 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 really had a huge effect on me. I mean, it was 30 years ago. I talk about it to this day. When you realize that when you do that kind of thing, it's not perceived as a sign of weakness, it's perceived as a sign of strength. then all of a sudden you begin to get to this place where you can actually understand what leadership really is. And that's the fundamental difference. You just have to get to the place where you understand that as long as you are competent and as long as you are capable, and I'm not talking about even an admission of weakness so much as just an admission of your own humanity, your own ability to not be smarter than everybody else combined. That's a powerful thing, and that's kind of what eating last means. I think it's saying, even though I'm in charge here, I'm not God. I don't have all the answers. I'm working with really good people. You're really good people. If you know a better way to do this, let's all do it. There you go. And to put a button on this, there's that old saw about how first-rate minds hire first-rate minds and second-rate minds hire third-rate minds. It's really true. I've been a smart guy for most of my life. I'm not the smartest guy out there. I'm not even close to the smartest guy out there, but I can hold my own when I need to. And so I can say things like Thomas Sowell is 100 times smarter than me. The Rush Limbaugh's 100 times smarter than me. All these guys are brilliant people. They're brilliant people. And the reason I can do that is because I don't have any insecurity about how smart I am. I'm smart enough. And so I don't have to worry about it. It's not something I have to prove, which is what the liberals seem to be doing all the time, is constantly proving how smart they are and constantly proving how good they are. And I don't have to prove how smart I am or how good I am because I'm not insecure about being smart or being good. I'm both. So you have to ask yourself, when people start raving about, I'm in charge, or people start saying, do as I say, I'm the genius, I'm the creative genius, people start using terms like that, you got to start asking yourself, who is it they're really trying to convince? Is it those other people or is it themselves? I think we know the answer to that. So there you go. It's Joshua Tiemann's double feature here. Joshua Tiemann's asks, is it naive or noble to want to make your friends into enemies, into friends from a foreign... I think we must have gotten a little backwards. To make your friends into enemies from a foreign policy standpoint. It's probably naive and noble, but it's achievable at a high cost. And the way you achieve making your enemies into friends is to use the formula that's only been tried once in history that I'm aware of. I'm sure it's actually been done earlier, come to think of it, but the only one I'm aware of is the United States after World War II. If you've got somebody who really wants you dead, then you've got what is often called the fire breathers. In Japan, there were the really radical militarists who were utterly convinced that Japan was the master race, and same thing with the Nazis. And every time you start talking about master races, you start coming back to that insecurity issue again. Well, who are you really trying to prove something to here? But in any event, you get these people who are screaming for war and ginning up the entire population for war. And certainly you see these in the Islamicist movement. All these guys in the streets with their fists in the air, and they got their ski masks on, and they're getting ready to kill everybody. Those are the people who are the problem, and those are people that you have to kill. They just have to be killed. You have to kill them in combat, and you got to get them, and you got to get almost all of them. And then, unfortunately, if this is a real serious clash of civilizations, kind of total war sort of thing, in order to turn enemies into friends, you have to do two things in sequence, and you got to get the sequence right. First of all, you have to utterly defeat them. You have to kill their fire breathers, and then you have to basically get to a position where the population has decided that they would rather surrender and have peace than another day of this. And since democracy has never once in history declared war on another democracy, it's always the fascist dictators that do this. Because these people are controlled by fear and intimidation, they've been told the entire time, in order to get them to fight, that we, the Americans or whoever, are baby-eating murder rapists who are going to come in there, and if they surrender, boy, it's just a matter of time before the Americans set fire to their children in front of their eyes, and this and that and so on. And that's what the Germans were told about the Americans, what the Japanese were told about the Americans. So the two-part alchemy to turn mortal enemies into lifelong friends is you have to beat them so severely in war, you have to defeat them so severely, that they're actually ready for you to come in and basically be this horrific occupying army, because another day of this kind of war is just not tolerable. And then when you show up with Hershey bars instead of crowbars, accomplish something in the human spirit that is very, very profound. You make people realize that they were wrong to fight this war. And I think that you can certainly make that case for Germany and Japan both, that if you ask a modern Japanese or a modern German, certainly those who lived through the war, I think both of them, needless to say, with many exceptions, but the bulk of both of those people, both of the Japanese and Germans who are still alive from the war years, would agree that it was best for them, forget about what's best for us, that it was best for Germany and best for Japan that they lost that war, that America won the war. There's no question that Germany and Japan are two of the most prosperous, decent, reliable, certainly they're two of the best allies we have. And they're both extremely pacifistic countries. How did the two most warlike countries on the planet, Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, go to being the most pacifistic countries in the world? Because we killed all their fire eaters and we hurt them real bad. And then instead of coming in and setting up an occupation that generated more and more and more generations of rebellion, we came in and actually helped them build their country back. Brent Cates just said, we acted like Americans. That's it. I couldn't have put it better if I had 100 years to think it over. That's precisely what we did. We acted like Americans. And this isn't just a modern, recent thing. U.S. Grant had a statement I thought so profound and so indicative of the kind of man that Ulysses S. Grant was. He was called a savage and a bull and a bloodthirsty murderer who just threw troops into battle and didn't give a damn about anybody. But of all the things that U.S. Grant said, he was a great, great man as a general, not a great president, a great man. U.S. Grant said many profound things, and one of the most profound things was he said, if we have to fight, I'd like to just fight, get it over with so that we can be friends. And it's really true. It's this understanding that, okay, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, let's get it over with. And I think the one thing you don't do is you don't leave somebody half defeated, because then the fire eaters just reinfect the population, and that animosity builds up, and the population is never convinced they're beaten, and there you go. The Confederacy was beaten. The Confederacy was beaten. You don't have to like the outcome, but they knew that they were beaten. Classic line about that, by the way, was not long after the war, a year or two after the war ended, Joseph Johnson, he's kind of an unknown general, really. He ran the Western Campaign for a fair amount of the war, and Robert E. Lee got a lot of the glory, but Joe Johnson did a lot of the fighting. And Joe Johnson was on a steamship 3 or 4 or 5 years after the Civil War had ended, and he was on a rail on this steamship with one of these young guys, Shelby Foote said, the kind of guy who's always talking a big talk but was never actually in the battle when the bullets were flying. And it was 3 or 4 years after the war, and this young man was talking about how the Confederacy is going to do it again, and blah blah blah, and that the Confederacy was never really defeated. The Confederacy was never really defeated. And Joseph Johnson turned to this guy and he said, "Well, sir, you may not have been defeated, but I was." And that's from a man who fought he was the last major army to surrender. I guess Kirby Smith was the last general to surrender, but Joe Johnson surrendered after after Lee. So, he knew he was beaten, and once he knew he was beaten, then you could be friends. And this is what happened to Germany. But if you don't finish them, if you don't finish the fire eaters, if you don't finish the warmongers in that society, then you're going to have to go back. And we're learning this right now in Iraq, aren't we? And we learned it in Korea, who we never defeated. We just had a ceasefire. The Germans in World War I, probably the classic example, they were beaten on the battlefield, but the people at home didn't feel defeated. So Hitler was able to drum up all of this, nonsense about how they were stabbed in the back by the Jews, or they were stabbed in the back by this. And the military was defeated. Ludendorff had 3 big offensives, the big Operation Michael offensives in 1918, and they failed. And the Germans lost the war on the battlefield. But before the battle was really brought home to the German people, the armistice was signed. So the German people just never felt it was easy to convince them that they didn't really lose because they didn't want to admit that they lost. Wasn't brought home. So you have an armistice, and then guys like Adolf Hitler are just sitting there stewing. And so, as I said, the equation is you have to actually defeat them, kill their fire breathers, and make the population realize we've had enough. And then you help them to your feet. Then you show them kindness. You defeat them, then you show them kindness. what we do in Iraq and what happened after the Treaty of Versailles is you don't defeat them, and then in Versailles, you not only don't defeat them completely, but then you're actually cruel to them. That's not going to do it. That's going to get you another war, and sure enough, you did. So this is the other one from the Joshua Tiemann's doubleheader. Bill Whittle, in another world, in another time, would you be prosecutor or defense? That's a great question. And the answer, I thought, my knee-jerk reaction was prosecution, because I hate crime and I hate violence on defenseless people. I hate injustice, and I hate cruelty. And crime is cruelty. Even little crimes are cruelty. Little things. When I moved to Hollywood, out of the valley, I think I was 2 days in Hollywood. I came out to my car to go to work the next day, and somebody had stolen a little leather initial briefcase that my dad gave me. And this was after my dad had died, and the guy got $5 for that thing, and it just made me want to just sit on the roof with a rifle and just leave $20 bills on the dashboard and wait. But it's an assault, and it's cruelty, and it's selfishness, and it's all that stuff. So my knee-jerk reaction would be say prosecutor, but then I realized if it turned out that somebody was innocent, then I would very much want to be a defense attorney, and that's when I realized Josh, I want to be on the side of justice. If somebody's committed a crime, then I want to prosecute him. If somebody's innocent of a crime, then I want to defend him. So while my inclination would be to punish crime, because I think there's a lot more guilty people in the criminal justice system than unjustly accused innocent ones, a lot more. I don't know what the number is. I'd be curious to know what the percentage is. Of all the people who go to trial in this country, I would be very curious to know how many of them were innocent for criminal charges. I'll bet it's less than 5%. So that's kind of where the initial response went. But as I think about it, as I said, I want to be on the side of justice. So there you go. Oh, look, it's another Tiemann's. I just take the question, by the way. I don't really think too much about who says it, but no, what do you know? He asks, is optimism an American value? Zechariah, in my opinion, optimism is the American value. It's the unique American value. It's the only uniquely American value. When we talk about national attributes, needless to say, you're generalizing, and there's no question about generalization. And the minute people start saying, yeah, but, it's like you're just proving exceptions that, basically prove the rule. So if you want to talk about national generalizations, the British are very decent people, and the British are very funny people. My mom is British. My dad is half British. The British are the least sexy people on the face of the earth. The British are, if there's such a thing as anti-sexy, that's what they are. Oh, show us your naughty bits. It's horrific. Horrific. Incredible how unsexy the British are in every way. Even the language. Naughty. It's childish. But they're very, very, very decent people, law-abiding people, civilized people, and in the main kind people. Very funny. In my opinion, all this is coming from my value set, of course. A little too willing to worship lordships. A little servilism kind of bred into them, I think, after all of those, millennia of aristocracy. And the British produce some fine scientists, some very, very, very smart Brits. The Germans, needless to say, are brilliant, technologically engineering people, brilliant people. The Italians, the things I like most about the Italians is I really love the Italian love of life. I love the fact that they have 2-hour dinners. I love the fact that they care about their families, and I love Italian design. I have an Italian airplane because it's just gorgeous. I love the fact that the style and the elegance, the lines are important to them. But and the Japanese are extremely hardworking, extremely meticulous, extremely elegant. The Japanese also culture very elegant, very very visual, very clean. Very clean, and very disciplined, and very evolved in a way. And all these qualities you can apply to everybody. And the United States obviously has a great deal of technical skill, a very inventive country, and a very dynamic country. But ultimately, if you really want to know what really makes us unique, it's optimism. It's an optimistic country. And you kind of have to be an optimistic country if you think about it, right? Because we're composed of people that decided to get on a boat and go someplace they've never been before. And that's optimism, man. That's optimism. Where are we going? Well, we're going to where the streets are paved with gold. Do you really believe that? I guess some people might have actually believed it, and I'm sure a lot of people are disappointed. But basically, it's an optimistic thing to do, to pull up from all of your family and all of your roots and all of your property and just go someplace and hope things are going to be better. It's an optimistic nation because we're self-selected optimists. And it's the pessimists that stay there. And honestly, I think of all the things I got with the Russians on this afterburner. I'm sorry, this firewall on the secret police. It's the Russian pessimism. It's just the cynicism, the bitterness, and the not even bitterness, not even enough energy to be bitter. Just this resigned, cynical nihilism. It's just awful to me. It's awful. But Americans are optimistic, and this is why what this president is doing is so galling to me. When put all the politics aside, even put all the important stuff like the spending and the foreign policy aside, if you make it difficult, if you make it so expensive for people to start a business, and you take so much of their money that they can't stay in business, then you start breeding optimism out of the system. And when you think about the simple fact that America invents everything, because we do, including culturally, it's all optimism. Why am I in this room? I mean, why am I in this room with this new chair that I got? There it sits. I took a 3-year lease on this building. I don't have a guaranteed income. My income is dependent on me being able to convince you guys that this is worth some money. That is an optimistic thing to do, and it's a terrifying thing to do. And when you are confronted with 3-year leases and credit checks and writing checks and all of those obligations, when you come down to it, it's freaking terrifying. It's a terrifying thing. You have to worry about make payroll. I don't explain that to most of you. But ultimately, so why do you do it? I mean, I could have gotten a full-time job. I could have probably gotten a full-time job from the people I already work for. Why do I do it? It's because I fundamentally think I got a chance to do better. Got a chance to be, master my own destiny and live my own life. That's optimism. And we've got it we got it in our blood. We got it in our genes. And I think it's going to take a lot more than this one guy to breed that out of our system. I really dearly hope that we can get an actual conservative in there in 2016 so that you can just simply go in and just say, we're going to get all this crap out of the way now, and boom, watch what happens. We'll see. I'm optimistic that will happen. Moving on, we got about 7:30 out, so we got about half an hour here. Denise Moore, the lovely and talented Denise Moore, asks, could the country ever get so far removed from reality that there simply wouldn't be anyone to convey an actual account of our heritage and history to straighten us back out? I'll tell you, it certainly feels that way, doesn't it, Denise? It feels like, it feels like these simple facts, these simple truths are so far away. I really got angry earlier today with a couple of comments, and a couple days ago too. Sort of moral equivalence between Russia and America. America has manifest destiny and slavery, and please. So it's the pot calling the kettle black. There's really no difference between Russia and America. Well, there's a lot of difference between Russia and America. As I said, we fought a civil war and a revolution without a single political reprisal, and they fought a civil war and a revolution and murdered 30, 40, 50 million people. So there is a difference. And the thing that's so shocking about this is not so much, gee, how did you get to know all this stuff about the history of the Russian secret police? The question is, why doesn't everybody know this about the Russian secret police? This is not, in 7-8 minutes on that firewall, you got the basics of it. Why doesn't everybody know this? There's a movie I saw after I wrote this thing, and I'll probably put a post up about it. It's called The Chekist. It's a Russian film, Chekist, for somebody who worked for the Cheka. It's a Russian film. It's, I think, about 2009. It's available on YouTube. If you search for it, you can find it with English subtitles. It's a fairly low res. it is something that I think everybody, if I could make American kids watch one movie, so well, if you could make people watch one movie, what would it be? It would be The Checklist. Prepare yourselves. The main thing that most Americans will find really just disturbing about it is there's just nothing but endless full frontal nudity. Nothing but full frontal nudity. Men and women both, and these are not magazine models. These are regular people, and the reason there's so much full frontal nudity in The Checklist, and I mean it's nothing but nonstop full frontal nudity, is because The Checklist takes place in the basement of the Lubyanka, where people are brought in 5 at a time, and they're just shot to death in front of a series of wooden boards, and then they're put on a meat cart, and then they're hauled up, feet first, up a chute, put in a cart, and driven away. So you see lots and lots and lots of dead bodies, and that's why that movie is so effective, because it opens with a scene of an execution, and there's all that horror, and you can kind of connect to it, and you can kind of get a sense of, oh my God, this wasn't a joke, this actually happened. There are actual faces. I can see people's faces there. These individuals. And then, to the enormous credit of the filmmaker, he doesn't just show 5 people or 20 people being killed in an opening scene. He goes back down into the basement again and 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 again. I bet you in that movie I saw 300 faces of people who saw that happen. People asking what it's called. It's called The Chekist. It's from the Cheka. Cheka was the name of the Soviet secret police in the very early days of the revolution. And the Chekist is somebody who worked for them. A Chekist is a member of the Cheka. Chekist, I think, the Chekist. And it is on YouTube. You got to search for the version with English subtitles. Somebody just playfully said, Dave, big booty. Or Big Booty said, nudity? Hey, it's a perk. It's not a perk in this movie. This is not that kind of nudity. This, as I said, is not bikini model nudity. This is not like the teenage horror slasher film where the beautiful cheerleader takes her top off. This is just regular people, stark naked, being shot in the back of the head, falling down into a pile, being hauled up by their feet with a rope and thrown into a meat cart. That's the kind of nudity it is. Yes, Cheka, Winston Smith, it was the original KGB, was the first real state secret police, was the Cheka. It's a hard watch. It's not something you want to watch with kids. And it's the actual violence. There's no gore in it. It's not a bloody movie in any real way. It's just awful, and it's awful because even though you only see 200 or 300 people of the 300, who am I kidding? Millions of people, you realize it just keeps coming, and there are little moments. One of them, some of them seem so unnatural, but the idea of just walking up to a wall and waiting to get shot in the head seems unnatural. It seems unnatural to me. The first essay I ever wrote was about this idea that I just don't think Americans would line up. I just don't think we would. Maybe I'm wrong. And one of the things I learned from Life and Fate is that this is a profound insight in Life and Fate. He said, once people have you naked, your ability psychologically to resist is really greatly reduced. I had never given that a moment's thought before, ever, but I bet that's absolutely true. Just the fact that you're standing there naked, really, I'm going to say really, that would just really cut a lot of the legs out from your ability to resist. But with all that said, maybe it's wishful thinking on my part. They were shot with revolvers, right? They were shot with revolvers from 6 feet away. With that said, you've got a small room that's barely, 10, 20 feet wide. You've got 5 Chekist executioners with pistols, and you got 5 people, one up against a wall, and you got one guy shooting each one of these people in the head one at a time, and a guy with a stick going, fire. If it were me, look, once you're in that room, you're not getting out of that room alive, right? Everybody knows you're not getting out of that room alive. Once you're down there, you're going to die. There's not going to be a big Tom Cruise escape. But I just cannot imagine, for Americans, I just can't imagine us just lining up, waiting to go. When it's not like there's an army there. It's not like there's guys with machine guns there. There's 5 guys with pistols, and there's 5 naked people just screaming, yeah, and they're sick. And they're not 30 feet away. They're 5 feet away. I do it, man. I really do. I really would rather. I would rather go out that way. I know it's easy to say. I'm perfectly willing to admit I might be wrong about this. But on the other hand, I think about this a fair amount. I think about it a fair amount, and I actually think I think I've thought about it enough so that I would be prepared in a way that these people were not prepared. I'm mentally prepared to do something like that. I really just don't see Americans doing it. I just don't. I'm not saying there wouldn't be many, if not most of the Americans would do it. I'm sure many, if not most people, would just stand there. But we would fight back harder than this. And these people have just been so beaten down by oppression for so long, they just, what else can they? They don't know anything else. They don't know anything better. But here's the reason I wanted to take this question, is because, Denise, the only thing I actually have come to really fear is the state. I've done so much reading this last year on the Nazis first and then the communists, and it's the power of a state gone mad is really the only thing in this world to genuinely fear. When a weak-chinned chicken farmer has the ability to exterminate 10 million people, and when you look at the people who were in position of authority during the Nazi regime, they're all lunatics. And I don't mean they're lunatics because they wanted to kill people. No, I mean they're garden variety lunatics. They're garden variety lunatics. These people are not like, they had a mad plan for world domination in the way that like Blofeld is mad in a Bond movie. Oh, Mr. Bond, I have a laser orbiting an orbit. No, they're barking mad. They're just barking mad, crazy garden variety neurotics, paranoids, and sociopaths. They're just regular crazy. And for them to run the government is just, what do you say? I mean, you can make a pretty good case. I think I've said this before, and I've said it on the show. You can make a pretty good case. Given the fact that when you get into the industrial murders of these socialists, 200 million people maybe, given the fact that historical battles are actually only dealing with relatively small numbers of people, somebody could sit down and do the math and say the greatest killers in human history are disease, and then socialism, and then war. I bet you war comes after. I bet it does. It'd be close. And of course, the one thing you see, and this is the thing, of all the things that drive me crazy, this is it. It's like, Stalin, Stalin was, how can you equate communism with Stalinism? Communism wasn't Stalinism. Stalin, you hear this all the time from these D-bags, these Marxists and socialists. No, you're equating communism with socialism. No, you're equating Stalinism with communism. No, it's that was an aberration. How dare you compare the two? Well, my response would be, so Stalin was an aberration? Yes. And so Mao was an aberration. He was an aberration. He killed 50 million people. And Hitler, with his National Socialism, he's an aberration. Yeah. And Pol Pot was an aberration too, was it? Yeah. And Castro in Cuba murdered all those people as an aberration too. Yeah, that was an aberration. And what about down in Venezuela, Chavez as an aberration? Yeah, it's an aberration. There's a lot of aberrations, actually, isn't it? A lot of aberrations. Funny how that works. It's not an aberration. It's the ultimate byproduct. It is the ultimate byproduct because when you have a powerful state that is dependent on creating heaven on earth, then that state will be used. If heaven on earth is not being achieved, somebody's got to be responsible, and those people will be killed. For the greater good, of course. And that's what happens. And when you I had this thought recently, and I'd love to get some feedback on this, because it's a little out there, but I think there's some truth to it. So people say, well, it's true, the communist Chinese and the Russians and the Germans and the Vietnamese and the Cambodians and the Cubans and all the rest of those socialists, yes, it's true, they went too far. But look at socialism in Sweden or look at socialism in France. See, it works just fine. I'd not thought about this before. I think socialism in Sweden works. Sweden, let's take as an example. Sweden, Finland, lovely societies, peaceful, decent, everybody's happy. Everything's equal, great deal of egalitarianism in Sweden. So let's just use Sweden as an example. Sweden has not turned into Stalin yet because of the United States military. That's my thesis. Sweden can afford to be kind, gentle socialism only because of the capitalist titan across the ocean that is defending Sweden from the people who will bring you the other kind of socialism. There's two reasons why Sweden can, for the time being anyway, afford to be nice socialism. Number one, they can afford to be nice socialism because they don't have to pay for a military. If Sweden had to defend itself against Russia, I don't think they'd have their socialist state. There was a time when Sweden did have to defend itself against Russia. There was a time when Finland fought Russia to a standstill. Those days are over. Why can they afford their socialist state, which is so loving and kind and gracious? Because you and I as Americans are paying for the defense of Sweden. That's why. That's why. Because we're paying for their defense. And if they had to pay for their defense, they wouldn't have the money to have their socialist state, especially in the face of what's going on next door in the country with the big bear in it. And I'll go further. If America was not here to defend them, they would be overrun by the more virulent brand of socialism. So without America or the West, without capitalist countries, Sweden would either be swallowed up by Russia, or it would have to spend itself into defending itself against Russia, and it couldn't defend itself against Russia. It's the presence of the capitalist countries that allow these people to have their socialism. I'll stand by that. I really will. I think that's absolutely it. If you were to take that away from them, they couldn't have this little island of stability in an unstable world. They have cradle-to-grave socialism because they don't pay for defense. We pay for their defense. And even if they had to pay for their own defense, if we were just out of the picture, then it'd just be a question of, well, okay, the Russians or somebody else, or the Chinese or somebody else would simply say, well, we have the power of the state behind us, and we're going to go and take Sweden. And what are you going to do about it? That's what happens. It's not what happened once. It's what happened. It's what happens every time. It's not an anomaly. It's not an aberration. When you empower the state and destroy the individual, individuals will be destroyed. And they'll take everything because they didn't make it, and they don't know how. And so when I hear people equating America and Russia, I just lose my mind. I just absolutely go off the deep end, because when you see a movie like The Checklist, you realize that 680,000 people killed in 1 year is not a number. Those are individual people. It's everybody in Baltimore, and you have to see their faces. I got a little bit off track there when I was talking about some of the things these people say as they go in to get lined up. There's this one woman. They all know they're going to die. It's not like they don't know they're going to die. Some people are trying to say, I have secret knowledge about gold that's buried outside of town. It's not a bad idea, actually. Good for you. One person or two fights back. One woman bit a guy on the arm. I was cheering out loud, as actually shouting. It's like, yeah. But most people would have something to say, but this one woman knew she was going. She was probably a former aristocrat, good-looking woman, naked, walking to the wall with all the bullet holes in it, with all the other naked people facing the wall, 6 feet away from the guys with guns. And she turned to the guy who was walking to the wall and said, what about my cats? Who's going to feed my cats? I mean, will you take care of my cats? It just had such truth to me. It was just such an odd thing and such an unusual thing, but it just seems so true to me. You know, that's what you would worry about, is you're about to be murdered by your own government. I don't know where I said this. I think I said it on Trifecta, or maybe I said it on a members-only Trifecta. One of the things most remarkable about these socialists, these communists especially, it's such a religious experience for them. It is a religious movement, and it is a religious experience. And so when all these people were being shot, especially the first group that they shot, the old Bolsheviks, they called them, the people who actually led the revolution against the Tsar, they were the first people killed because they were the biggest threat to Stalin. So all of Lenin's comrades were killed. All the people that were the heroes of the Civil War were killed. All of these old school communists, the actual revolutionaries, were killed. And there's two things I want to say about that. First of all, for us to get our minds around that, try to imagine that John Adams takes over for George Washington, and once he's in office, he has Washington murdered. The first thing he does is put up pictures of himself with Washington, and Adams starts to put himself into the scene of some of these conversations, and the next thing you know, he's talking about some of the battles, and then you find out that Adams was at most of these battles and advising Washington on the outcome of the battles, and then you find out that Adams is saying that anybody who supported Washington is suddenly just taken away and beaten up or killed. And then the next thing you know, Thomas Paine is strangled in his sleep, and you find out that Madison was killed in a suspicious cart accident, and Thomas Jefferson was found one morning with an ice pick buried in the back of his head in Montecito. And anyone who was associated with Jefferson or the Democratic Party was taken out and killed, and Adams sits there in the White House for 40 years. And all of the founders, all of our founding fathers are killed except for Adams, who had them all murdered. It's what happened. It's what happened in Russia. And it's almost funny. It's almost like something you laugh about. It's just something you just simply cannot process. I'm telling you can't get around it. So that's the one thing. And the other thing is that when these people went to their deaths, especially the first revolutionaries, but really almost all of these Russians, when you talk to people who are in the Gulag and all the true believers that love the Soviet system and it's the workers' paradise and so on, you found time and time again that these people felt, yes, the state made a mistake with me, but that's a once or twice kind of a thing. Most of the people out there are guilty. They're traitors or they're anti-Soviet or whatever. And if Stalin only found out about all this murdering that was going on, boy, would he be upset. And many, many times, we found this in Nazi Germany too, many times, the last words out of the mouths of people being murdered by communists were, "Long live Comrade Stalin." And many times the last words out of the mouth that were being shot by Hitler, officers and people during purges. Ernst Röhm, the head of the SA, was murdered in a room, and I believe his last words were, "Heil Hitler." So let me just say this about that. I'm a conservative, Tea Party conservative. I believe in individualism. I don't believe in an all-powerful state. I'm a big supporter of Ted Cruz. I think Ted Cruz is awesome. I think he's a great guy. I'm an enormous supporter of Ted Cruz, and I'd love to see Ted Cruz as president. If one day I wake up and find myself in a basement and I'm about to be executed on the orders of Ted Cruz, long live Ted Cruz will not be the final thing out of my lips. Ted Cruz will be in my final sentence, and it'll be a 4-word sentence, and Ted Cruz will be 2 of those 4 words, but long live Ted Cruz will not be the last thing out of my mouth. So that's what you have to ask yourself is why these people went along with it, why they went along with it. The greater good, always around the corner of the communist glory. It's just around the corner. Just get rid of a few more people. There you go. Horrible. This is going to generate a lot of steam. I'll just plow through this. You don't have a lot of time tonight, I'm afraid, another 10 minutes. Dave Olson, our lovely and talented Dave Olson, is back again, and he says AK-47 versus M16s, pros and cons of both, and who wins in a straight-up contest. I've seen this argument done 150 times on TV, and most gun guys always say it's the AK, and I'm not going to argue with gun guys because I'm not a gun expert, but I will say a couple things about this. First of all, the difference between these two weapons, and we're going to assume that we're not dealing with the M16A1, which had a lot of problems. We're going to talk about the modern M16, the M4, and AR-15. I prefer the AR-15 for a number of reasons, but the reason I prefer the M16 is a philosophical reason. It's a philosophical reason. The M16 is a weapon that is more accurate over long range. And what that means is that it requires more training to use, and it reflects the values of our society. This is a profound change in warfare, and I've never heard anybody really talk about it before, but I noticed it. I really noticed it not too long ago. Somebody here will tell me how long ago. But not too long ago, I started to notice that every soldier in the field had either an M4, but they had optics. They had sights. They had magnification. Precision targeting, let's just call it that. They had optics on their weapons. They didn't have the iron sights anymore. Why is that? Well, the iron sights are... I've fired iron sights on an M16, on an AR-15. I was absolutely astonished at how accurate that rifle was with iron sights. I couldn't believe it. First time I ever fired an AR-15, I was hitting a steel plate a foot across at 100 yards 9 out of 10 times. I just never fired one, and that was just with the iron sights. They're amazing. But the reason that we have the optics on the sights is because our guys are highly trained guys, and the accurate weapon is designed to kill bad guys before they can get in range to kill you. It's really that simple. It's quality over quantity. We're outnumbered, and so we have to have a smaller number of highly trained individuals with precise weapons who can eliminate enemy soldiers before they get into range. And I saw Soul Survivor recently after it was in theaters. And that whole thing is just heartbreaking. I don't know how many men those guys actually killed, those 4 guys. It looked like it was 100. I'll bet it was 100. But the thing that was so interesting to me watching that incredible half-hour, 40-minute gunfight, just incredible 40-minute gunfight, was that as long as these guys had range on the Taliban, they were in pretty good shape, because these guys are shooting their AKs and they're shooting from the hip, or these guys don't know how to hit anything. They'll hit something eventually, but they're not marksmen. As long as they could keep these guys at range, I bet those Force SEALs could have stayed there all day. But once the Taliban closed to close quarters, then it was just a question of who could get the shot off first. And then numbers tell. Then you're just simply surrounded. You're simply outnumbered. And so the whole battle seemed to me to be nothing but an endless series on the part of these Force SEALs to keep increasing the range. They weren't running away from the guys. They were trying to get to a point where they could use that superior accuracy to effect. And so they'd literally fall down a mountainside and get 100 yards on these guys. They're 100 yards away. They're gonna start being in their advantage. And so everything I like about the AR-15, I like about it philosophically, in addition to the fact that I just really like the rifle. I've heard guys in the field saying, this, stopping power and all this stuff. I'm not qualified to talk about that. I imagine it hurts more to get hit by a 7.62 round. But on the other hand, I bet getting hit with an AR-15 round is pretty painful too. So I don't know what to tell you about that aspect of it. But there is one more thing I will say, and this is from the heart. And I don't know how to put it any plainer than this. You look at the silhouette of an M16, and you look at the silhouette of an AK-47, and the M16 looks like freedom, and the AK-47 looks like tyranny. It's just that simple to me. I know a lot of people talk about the reliability of the AK, the superior stopping power, and I know a lot of people say the AK is a better weapon in every way. And maybe it is. Maybe it is. The AK may in fact be a better weapon, but to me, anytime I see somebody holding an AK-47, that's either a terrorist or murderer of some kind, and anybody holding an M16 looks like the good guys to me. So that's my personal preference, aesthetic or whatever you want to call it. That's it. I'm an M16, AR-15 guy all the way home. Chris Taylor says, can you play that I Know a Place song before TSL tonight? Chris, we play it every night before the show, but we don't record it. In fact, I'd love to record it, but I recorded it once, and when I recorded it and uploaded it to YouTube automatically apparently scans all this stuff, recognized the wavefront, and gave me a warning saying, this is a copyrighted material, and I basically trimmed it out because I don't want to get any of this stuff pulled. I got a clean record with YouTube. I'd like to keep it that way. But we play I Know a Place by Petula Clark before every episode live, and we play some other stuff too. And as I start to get some of this stuff a little more organized, I'm going to start, when we get the TSL banner up, we're going to be shooting the Stratosphere Lounge on real cameras, which means we won't have to worry about all this lighting stuff, and we'll have a chance to get some of this stuff done right. But before we start the show, we have a lot of eclectic music, which I'm trying to mix up and trying to add more of. So we're going to get our amazing Astro Girl, Desiree, on this, producing the Stratosphere Lounge. A couple weeks or so, when we get the new background with new cameras and new everything, then we should have a chance to really buff it up a little bit. And that'll be part of the relaunching the members only side. So hopefully we'll get that improved a little bit for you. Let's see here. Got time for one more, I think. Why not? I'll get to two more real quick. Ben Hoffman says, what are your thoughts on some of the more famous conservative radio TV personalities like Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, etc.? It's been an incredible honor of mine. One of the things that makes me wake up every day with just kind of like this amazement on my look. Is this really happening to me? I've had a chance to meet those three men and several others too. It's been one of the signal honors of my life. I'll just tell you about them individually. Just the three that are mentioned and whatever else comes to mind. I met Dennis Miller a few times. Dennis Miller is the shyest man I've ever met. He is incredibly, incredibly shy. You wouldn't think so, but he is. He's extremely shy, very personable, very, very nice, but very shy, and brilliant guy and funny guy, really funny. Rush I met not too long ago, and I didn't know if Rush knew who I was. I didn't know if Beck knew who I was. Rush autographed a book for me that blew my mind. He said, big fan, keep up the hard work, and you're doing wonders out there. And it was one of the high points of my life. And And Rush Limbaugh is a genius. Rush Limbaugh is a genius. He's an intellectual genius without question. He's a major IQ. But more than that, Rush Limbaugh is a moral genius. He's a moral genius. I've heard Rush say things that just took my breath away. And they took my breath away because of the simplicity of it. And he said things that I said, I can't believe he said that. And then I realized, why can't I believe he said that? These are my most deeply held beliefs. The genius of Rush Limbaugh is he understands this so well that not only is he not ashamed of this, not only is he not a member of the Stockholm Syndrome Club, which affects virtually every Republican politician because we're so beat up by the pop culture, and in fact, even guys like me are beat up by the culture enough so there are things that we're still a little like, no, I don't know if I really can say that. Rush he just doesn't, not only doesn't run from it, he leads with it. And of all the stories I heard about Rush, the one I liked the best was he was, I didn't hear him do it live. Somebody told it to me secondhand, but apparently he was doing a show, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, I was flying from my home in Florida. I was going to play some golf in Texas, and I was on board my private jet EIB-1, and as we were somewhere over the great state of Alabama, was made known to me that somebody had forgotten to pack my golf clubs and my favorite hat. Not to worry, however, I made a quick phone call, and I had the golf clubs and the hat loaded on board my other private jet, which is EIB-2, and had that flown directly to Alabama, directly behind me, so I wasn't too gratefully inconvenienced. And I heard that, and I just went, is he out of his mind? And then I just said, this is what I mean by moral genius. The moral genius of the guy. Is capitalism good? Yes or no? Is wealth creation good? Yes or no? Does he own the money that he's made? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, and it is, then if Rush frickin' Limbaugh wants to travel in a private jet, that's his business. And if Rush Limbaugh wants to use his other private jet to pick up his golf clubs and his hat and fly it to him because it's convenient to him, but ultimately just because he can, then that is genius. Because Rush and I do not buy this global warming thing. We don't buy it. Not as written anyway. And to have the moral courage to just simply act on your own core beliefs. This is what I talk about with social proof. Social proof. I got a social proof trifecta that I didn't get posted. I got a lot of trifectas to catch up on. People would rather be seen to agree with other people than to have their most deeply held beliefs validated. And I'm here to tell you, Rush Limbaugh is the real deal. He's a moral genius. Mark Levin is one of the smartest people I've ever met. Mark Levin I've introduced twice. When Mark Levin, I gave him a handshake as I was coming down the stage the first time was several years ago, and gave me a big hug, and also told me he's a fan. It just blows your mind at people with that kind of intellect and that kind of courage and that kind of clarity. Clarity is the word, really. It's just incredible. And the final thing I'll say about this is Glenn Beck, who I had not met up until about 3 months ago, 3 months ago. I introduced Glenn Beck to a room full of people, and I've never been better. I have to say, it's just a fact. I've never been better in a room full of people in terms of public speaking than I was that day, and that was really important to me because I really wanted to be good that day. But I was absolutely at the top of my game. I was funny, I was clever, I was deep, and I know that sounds obnoxious, but it was my A game, and it was really, really something to see. And then Glenn got up, and by the way, before I went up there, I was scratching some notes. I just said hi to him, nodded at him, shook his hand, and I'm working on my final notes, and he came over around the table, kneeled on the ground, not like kneeling, and he just crouched down and just told me how much he enjoys the stuff I'm doing. And I was just, again, I'm just like, I was having this out-of-body experience. But Glenn got up and talked, and Glenn did an hour with his, I don't know if anybody's ever seen him, where he brings these historical things out. He brings out, D.W. Griffith's cane, and he talks about the microphone that Tokyo Rose used, and he let me hold the compasses, the dividers, the compasses that George Washington owned, held them in my hand. And I don't want to spoil that evening for you if you haven't seen it, but Glenn Beck talking about these historical things, and you know how I feel about history, is amazing. And I really have to be careful about giving you the wrong impression, because I don't know how to explain this without sounding really like a complete jerk about this. But this is just a professional opinion, all right? It's just a professional opinion. I watched Beck, and I've been to hundreds of events where I've been a speaker, and I've seen all of the speakers on the tour. And I'm not going to name any names, but I've seen everybody. I've introduced a fair amount of them. I've followed some of them. I've led some of them. I've seen everybody out there who's on the public circuit. And until I saw Glenn Beck, I knew for sure I was the best public speaker out there. And then I saw Beck, and I thought, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm this good. It's like you feel like a kid coming up from the minors. You got a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, and you're damn proud of yourself, and you know nobody knows who you are. And you come up for a little test. You walk into Yankee Stadium there, and you're still feeling pretty good because you know you got that fastball, and you're getting ready to show off and show the scouts what you got. And then you see some guy who's pitching for the Yankees, and he's throwing a 106-mile-an-hour fastball, and you just go, oh my God, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Glenn Beck can work a room, can move a room in terms of his ability and his delivery. In a live room, he is excellent. And one of the great things about being confident and taking pride in what you do and working very hard at what you do. I watched Beck up there, and I was right in the front row. He kept referencing me and joking around. It was great. And I was watching him, and I was blown away. And I was thinking, instead of me thinking, oh man, this guy's better than me, or instead of me thinking, no, it was just like, I really was watching him, and I was enjoying it so much. I kept thinking, could I beat this guy? In a good way, not like goddamn Glenn Beck or Bill. Geez, you're just not good enough. It was really a real intellectual thing. It was like, could I do this? I bet I could, but man, I would have to bring everything I had in the box, and that is so appealing. It's so appealing. I think that's what really makes, it's like you go up, a fighter pilot goes up for Top Gun exercise or red flag or something like that, and he's thinking he's really hot because he is hot. He's the best guy in the fleet, or the best guy on his carrier. He gets sent to Top Gun, and he thinks he's the best guy he's ever seen because he is the best guy he's ever seen. Then he meets somebody who's better than him, and instead of him justify, well, I got unlucky, I had a bad day, or no, the real competitors, the people who are really confident, who take their work seriously, when they are beaten by somebody. When you think you're really good at what you do and somebody beats you, you don't go, oh, it was a lucky. You say to yourself, I think I know how he did it. Now I have to really work hard. Now I have to work harder. I have to play on that level. I have to do better. I have to do better than I am. I gotta see if I can do it. So that's how I felt about both those guys. And Levin is brilliant and all that other stuff. But Glenn Beck worked a room. I've never seen anybody do anything like it before. Not from that side of the house. So, it'll be a fun clash of the Titans. It'll be a fun evening. That'll be a fun evening. That'll be a real fun evening. It's never going to happen, but it will be cool. And then I think the final question is from Dorothy Osborne. Yeah, I just barely have time for this. I'll just cut through this real quickly. Dorothy asks, and it's not a Tiemann's question, so I felt compelled to take it. It's probably a pseudonym. Dorothy asks, after 2 successful movies by Dinesh D'Souza, what movie or documentary subject would you make? And I just want to say, first of all, that if Michael Moore were going to jail for some minor campaign irregularities during the Bush administration, there'd be torches in the streets. People would be burning down buildings. So there's that. He's going to be a political prisoner. It's not to say he may not have broken the law, but these kind of things are slap on the wrist. He's going to jail? Sure he is. But the reason I wanted to take the question, other than to say there's a terrible injustice being done here, is just to say, Dorothy, that I do not ever want to make a documentary. I've seen some great documentaries. I love some documentaries. There's some really great documentaries. My favorite documentary of all time is Crumb, about the illustrator, the comic book guy. That's the best documentary I've ever seen. But there's some amazing documentaries, but I have no desire to make them, and I don't think they're going to help us at all. I don't think our side goes to documentaries. I don't think documentaries do much good. I thought I haven't seen the new one. I thought 2014 was terrific. It's a great documentary, but I don't think it made much of a difference. I don't think it was seen by anybody who didn't already know what Obama was, and I don't think it converted anybody. I sure don't think any 15-year-olds took their dates there to see things. So I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is feature films that are not political, that don't have any politics other than here's an individual with his own rifle trying to stop the government from killing aliens or hunting vampires or whatever, It's all about the story. It's all about story. It's all about the morality and the decisions, the ethical decisions and the choices that characters make. Good-looking guy, overcoming terrible odds, suffering great hardship, suffering loss, doubting himself, overcoming those doubts, confronting evil and overwhelming force, winning the girl. It doesn't matter what the politics of that story are, that people they'll be with you. And they know that. And now some of us know it too. And it's 7:37 and I got to run. Thanks again for a regular show. Also, I have to get these last two up. The 3-part space episode, part 2 is in 2 parts, and I need to download them so I can assemble them because they broke up, and I got to get them back up there. But we'll get caught up on all this stuff. And I just got a thing, somebody saying we didn't get the prepper questions. Somebody asked, one of the questions that I didn't even take was, should conservatives be preppers? I didn't take the question because I don't know what a prepper is. So if somebody wants to write me a couple of Facebook posts next week, we'll do a prepper episode, and presumably between now and then I'll have some idea what a prepper is, but I just don't know, so there you go. As always, thanks for this groovy office. Right now we've got the work lights on, we got boxes, we're super cool, kind of wicked, badass 21st century Captain Kirk thrones are, and pretty soon we'll have guests on those thrones, thanks to your support, support of Facebook friends and fans and members, obviously. Thanks for everything. I am going to have myself a fine little evening and weekend, and then I will be back at work Sunday night, but we'll see you Monday. So thanks for joining us. 77 episodes, and away we go. Take care now, everybody. Be careful out there. We'll see you next week. Bye.